So the Source TV radio network is known for its dedication to bringing the highest level of jazz content to the watching and listening audience. The owners of the network are also dedicated to bringing this important content to the fastest growing demographic. I am so grateful to have this opportunity. So let's begin today's show. My first guest is Paul Irving, who is a senior advisor at the Milken Institute, a national advisor at Manatt, Phelps and Phillips, LLP, a law and consulting firm, and a distinguished scholar in residence at the University of California Leonard Davis School of Gerontology. He previously served as the Milken Institute president and founding chair of its Center for the Future of Aging, an advanced leadership fellow at Harvard University, and chair and CEO of the Manatt firm. He co-authored the book, The Upside of Aging: How Long Life is Changing the World of Health, Work, Innovation, Policy, and Purpose. He is also a Wall Street Journal expert panelist and contributor to the Harvard Business Review, PBS, Forbes, and Next Avenue. Paul Irving speaks both nationally and internationally. I'm beyond proud to have Paul Irving as my first guest on Senior Nation. So let's welcome Paul to the show. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Phyllis. Good seeing you.
Good seeing you. It's great to have you here as my first guest. I'm beyond thrilled, as I said. You and I have spoken several times, over the years, but it's been a while. So is there anything else that you want to add, about your past and present work, accomplishments? I mean, the list is quite extraordinary, but is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I mean, you've kind of read all the stuff that has enabled me to make a living. The most important thing I've got going on right now is grandparenting. Nothing better than that. By the way, Phyllis, do you know why grandparents and grandchildren get along so well?
Oh,
common enemy.
What did you say?
Common enemy.
Right.
But anyway, that's the thing I've got going on.
I love that. I'm going to remember that. I have 3 grandchildren. Right. The oldest is, she was 11 in February, and the twin girls are 8 in June. And so I get that, actually. I'm going to tell that to my daughter. I don't know if she'll appreciate it so much, but I'm going to quote you. So
don't get me in trouble.
Anyway, so what prompted you to write the book, The Upside of Aging, which, by the way, I'll just tell the audience how I met you was I actually heard you doing an interview. Do you remember this? About this book on PBS many years ago. And I reached out to you because it resonated with me so much. So, I mean, you were really ahead of the curve with that. So what prompted you to write that book?
So I think it was a recognition of 2 things. One was that the demography of our population and populations around the world were changing at really an extraordinary, unprecedented speed and in unprecedented ways. That more and more of the population was old. Fewer and fewer people were being born. We have historically low birth rates. And that the demographic makeup that we've become used to really throughout history was going to change really remarkably. And if you could think about it kind of in shapes, Phyllis, we've been used to a demographic pyramid. That is, lots of young people at the bottom, relatively few old people at the top because people died younger. And we've now moved kind of from a pyramid, let's call it, to a cylinder or to a rectangle, where we now have people really evenly distributed across the age spectrum. But we're moving to a reverse pyramid, and that is a population with relatively few young people because people are not having kids at replacement rate, and a very, very large population of older adults. And what that meant is that all institutions, and we can talk more about this across society, our businesses, our health institutions, our cultural institutions, our urban design, our homes, would really have to change to deal with the realities of this shifting demography. So that was one thing I recognized. The other thing I recognized was because of older age, because of the possibilities that advances in medicine and sanitation and safety had given us, that we had these extra years that in many ways our forebears did not have, but we really didn't know what to do with them. You know, we had the blessings of science, but in some ways that social science had failed, longer lives, but not necessarily better lives. And so the question was, how could we ready our societies more broadly for this shifting demography, number one, and number two, how could each one of us individually and our families get ready for what was likely to be a longer life and potentially a life that was even more fulfilling than we anticipated. So that was the genesis.
Because is it not true that the actually fastest growing demographic now is 65 and above?
It is, and you know, we're looking very, very soon at a population where we have more people over 65 than we do people in teenage years and younger. And actually, one of the fastest growing populations is people over 85. So it's not just kind of the younger old, it's the older old as well. And again, that really means that we have to reimagine almost everything. As I often say to people, you know, if you just think about it in visual terms, when you walk down the street in your city or town and you kind of anticipate what the people you walk into will look like, right? It might be a young couple with a baby carriage. It might be people in middle age. It might be a couple of older people. The world is simply going to look much older in decades to come. By the way, I was in Japan a couple months ago, a place which you know and I know is kind of the demographic canary in the coal mine in many ways. And I spent some time in smaller towns in Japan and found really remarkable views in front of me where I would walk down the streets and see no one young, see only older people. And by the way, in many respects, enjoying their lives, right? I mean, there were parks where they were playing and all the rest, but the point is a very, very different demography than we've grown up with, and a very different demography than has existed really throughout human history.
So one of the areas of concern for me, which is actually, you were probably the forerunner of this, but you know, on a larger scale, you know, as a society, because there's, you know, and we could talk about ageism and, you know, what that means, not only as a society, but what that means for the individual. And I'm sure we all have examples of that. I have one from last night. You know, as a society with people living longer, and whether or not they live better, when I mean better, I don't mean just healthfully, but financially, in every aspect. You know, if we don't have a different view of older people, if we don't as a society provide a way for them to participate in society and have a meaningful contribution, especially for those who are living more healthfully, then what's the point of having all these people living longer? And with all of the research out there on reversing aging, and well, whether you like that term or not is another issue. It's not my favorite, but whatever. With people really trying to live longer as if they're reversing the aging process, but they can live longer, more healthfully. Well, you know, how do you see that? I mean, if we can't change that point of view, what is the point? How do we do that? How do we approach that topic?
Well, look back to your point about ageism. Ageism, as we know, is negative bias assumptions that are based on age. I mean, you know, Phyllis, literally, I can point at my bald head or sagging chin and say that some people will look at these characteristics and say that makes me less effective, less intelligent, less current than might have been the case a couple decades ago. I would make the case that I'm smarter, have better experience, and therefore more perspective than I might have in the past, even though the reality is I can't run as fast as I used to, and I can't play full court basketball the way I liked to play when I was a younger guy. So we have these expectations about aging, that age means necessarily decline, diminishment, lack of capacity, cognitive failure, and all the rest. And we can keep. I often say, F. Scott Fitzgerald said the sign of intelligence is being able to keep two conflicting ideas in one's mind at the same time, and being able to continue to function. So, on the one hand, we can't deny the reality that aging is the principal risk factor for chronic disease. Aging is the principal risk factor for dementia in its various forms, obviously Alzheimer's disease being the most frequently understood form of dementia. But on the other hand, aging is also an indicator of experience, wisdom, judgment, perspective, understanding how to navigate environments, understanding how to get things done in ways that oftentimes wasn't the case when we were younger. So rather than looking at older people as some uniform group, or frankly younger people as some uniform group, what we have to recognize is that we're all individuals. We age in different ways with different levels of capacity, different levels of health, and not make assumptions that are based on chronology. And very honestly, the notion that we still give any credence to chronology is ridiculous. In the wake of the decoding of the human genome, what we should know is that biology is a lot more important than chronology.
Right.
And there are, 40 and 50-year-olds who maybe sadly have lost it. And there are 80-year-olds who are crystal clear and still incredibly effective.
Right.
And so we should be sophisticated enough. We should be nuanced enough. We should be thoughtful enough to say, rather than looking at somebody at a given age and making assumptions about their capacity, we can look at them as an individual. And by the way, we have to do that if we're going to continue to fuel our economy with the low birth rates that I talked about before. We simply can't promote the notion that people should retire and get out of the way in the same way we might have in generations past.
Right.
No, instead, what we really have to do is we have to figure out a way to enable people to work differently, so that we have a spectrum of age in every employer, bringing the things that young people bring the things that old people bring. Laura Carstensen, who runs the Stanford Longevity Center, and I wrote a piece a while ago talking about the emerging body of evidence that suggests that mixed age teams, old people and young people working together, outperform same age teams of any age. So an enlightened employer in the future doesn't want to sideline their older employees. What they want to do is they want to enable them to continue to work and to work with younger people, and very likely as a result to enable that company to outperform, outcompete, and to sustain in a very different demographic.
We had a listener who commented and said that age and stage are in a constant state of definition and redefinition, which is basically what you're saying.
That's right.
That it shouldn't be static. We shouldn't think of it as in only one way. And somebody else just commented that they have retired 3 times already.
Yeah, and by the way, Phyllis, I have too. I mean, I'm an encore careerist, and by the way, I don't use myself as an example of anything other than to say I've been incredibly lucky. I've been blessed, but I think for most of my career, for my principal career, I was one of those big law firm lawyers. I did that for 30 years or so. I ran a large law firm, and then I decided I had kind of experienced a flattening learning curve. I wanted to do something else. I wanted to do something that was socially contributing. I went back to school, and I was lucky enough to do a fellowship at Harvard, spent a year there, and then came and ran a large nonprofit for a period of time and started this work that now I've been doing for 15, 16 years. So the point is not again that I'm an example of anything other than to say there's a wonderful opportunity, certainly for many of us, to reinvent and realize the joys of new learning and new challenge and all the rest. And I think it's incumbent on those of us who are lucky enough to have the opportunity to make sure that that opportunity is available to everyone.
I agree. I agree. You know, you and I were talking about this yesterday, and I've said this to many people. So, as you know, and you know, I've been a speech and language pathologist most of my career, and I've spent over 50,000 hours working in skilled nursing, long-term care environments. But I feel like I'm just beginning. I mean, now,
and now you're in the entertainment business.
Right. I'll just say what that is, because I'm working on a film project, and the takeaway of the film, or the content and the message, is about valuing older people and the relationship between generations. And actually, there's I guess he's a professor at NYU. I heard him last year at the United Nations NGO Committee on Aging. And he, through Generations United, did a study, a longitudinal study. It was fantastic, really. And I was hoping to get him on the show, in the next few weeks, but he's on sabbatical till the fall. But I'm sure I'll get him on the show then. But they looked at every stage, every stage, infancy, adolescence, 20s, 30s, 40s, and the benefit for each demographic from that relationship, how it changes, the older person with the infant, the older person with the adolescent,
I was joking about grandparenting, but not joking, because I think one of the things, by the way, I'm on the board of Co-Generate, which is a wonderful nonprofit focused on older and younger people living together, working together, and engaged in social change together. But the point is we shouldn't just be interacting with our own kids and grandkids. We should be interacting with young people across the country. They need us, and we need them. And frankly, if we know we have challenges in our country right now. We have divides. One divide we don't need is an age divide. And if we're going to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, if we're going to try to figure out a way to collaborate more effectively and to re-engage with each other as Americans, we're going to have to do it on the intergenerational basis. So I would strongly encourage people to think about the importance of relationship with younger people.
Absolutely. I just wanted to say, near where I live. So I live in Lower Connecticut, right on the border of New York, and there is the State University of New York. And on the campus, they have devoted a section of the campus to housing for older adults, so that there can be that relationship between the college age student and the older adult. And somebody else just said, a listener, living longer has become a totally different issue regarding death and how late stage age is managed. And of course, I have seen that firsthand within long-term care and skilled nursing. And that's a whole other topic that I really don't, want to talk about at this juncture. Yeah, I think it's so important. So, I was going to say this example from last night, because how people, even older people, have internalized this ageism in our society. So I was at this meeting last night, and they were talking about an event that they're going to have on Saturday. And they're going to have rhythm and blues and, different kinds of music, probably a little more contemporary music, probably dancing music also. And this one woman, there were a group of about 8 or 10 women. She said, oh, well, I might come, but that's not my type of music. So I said to her, well, what kind of music do you like? And this was her answer. I'm 92. I said, no, I didn't ask you what your age is. I asked you what kind of music do you like? So in her mind already, she's thinking because she's 92 and she doesn't appreciate that kind of music because she's 92. And I said to her, my daughter is in her mid 40s and she likes music from the 40s and 50s. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
So people have this message that they've internalized because of the ageism across in our society.
So two comments on that front. One, I would commend to that woman to take a look at the wonderful videos of Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga.
Fantastic.
Together, Tony Bennett didn't think that he was too old to collaborate with a talented younger performer, nor did she think she was too young to collaborate with somebody with Tony Bennett's, incredible talents. You're absolutely right about internalized ageism, and yes, there is this kind of societal imprint. There is this infection of ageism that we all have to fight, and I'm certainly involved in that fight. But let me also say that as we think about our own lives and we think about what we can do, I'd reference Becca Levy, who, Phyllis, I'm sure you know about. Becca's a renowned psychologist at Yale who's done work for many years, done these studies about the impacts of internalized ageism, and she, by the way, author of a book called Breaking the Age Code, if any of your listeners and viewers are interested. But what Becca has found, and everyone should listen to this, was maybe the most important factoid of our conversation. What she's found is that people who see their aging in a positive light, and she controls for this in various ways to assure the accuracy of her research, live on average 7.5 years longer. And that's as significant a variable as body mass index, smoking, or exercise. So the point is, what's above your neck, we know this, what's above your neck is just as important as what's below your neck. And that 92-year-old should recognize that there are still 92-year-olds that are listening to jazz, rock, and lots of other stuff.
Correct.
And enjoying it. Let me, by the way, also say, just when we think about the indicators of healthy aging, we kind of all think about cardiovascular disease. We all think about our weight. Everybody now is talking about GLP drugs, and everything else. At the end of the last administration, Vivek Murthy, who I think in many ways was the most consequential Surgeon General that we've had, certainly in my lifetime, a really good thinker, creative guy. He's the one, about all of his work on elevating awareness about isolation and loneliness as a public health threat. So he sent out something. If you haven't seen it, you absolutely should. He sent out something. This was his kind of prescription for America. This was the last thing that he wanted to say as Surgeon General. The last thing the point that he wanted to make, that everyone should think about when it comes to their own health. And you would think that this esteemed physician would have talked about nutrition, or would have talked about exercise, or would have talked about seeing your doctor or checkups or whatever. But no, what he referenced was three things that according to his observation were the three most important indicators of healthy longevity. And those three were relationships, service, and purpose.
Right.
Relationships, service, and purpose. So the importance of social connection, the importance of remaining in the game and continuing to develop new relationships, the importance of contributing to other people's lives, to try to contribute to the greater good in a meaningful way, and whether that's young people or other older people, or in some other way doing something that serves others. And then purpose, this reason for getting up in the morning, right? The thing that says, this is the reason why I'm here on the earth. I'm here for some reason. It's my legacy. It's the thing that I'm destined to do. So relationships, service, and purpose. If we all want to live longer and healthier, and frankly, if we want to have a healthier society, we would all be well served by minding Vivek Murthy.
So I just want to, there was one other comment here, and then I want to offer a little kind of example, and then we can take a short break. It says, look at rock music and Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Rod Stewart, right?
All still
The people saying that you were over 30, you became irrelevant, right?
I give a lot of speeches, and and one of my stock slides is Mick Jagger saying something like, God, I hope I'm not singing Satisfaction when I'm 30.
Right.
And here's Mick is out on tour at 81 or 82, still prancing around the stage and singing Satisfaction with as much energy as he ever did.
Right.
And Keith, who, by the way, no one thought would make it this long, is doing extraordinarily well.
I just want to interject and look at Rod Stewart when he went back and sang all of those, all of those songs from the 50s and the 60s, and they're fantastic. I mean, it's just incredible. It brings a different level of appreciation. But I just want to bring up one example when you said about purpose. And I think I wrote about this in one of my books. It was a study that was done by a psychologist in nursing homes. And the study involved plants. And it was placing plants in rooms of people. And half the people were told that the staff would come and water the plants. They would be responsible for, I'm sure you know the study, right? And the other half were told that they would be responsible for taking care of the plants, watering them and doing whatever needed to be done. And what did they find after a period of time was that the people who had the responsibility for caring for these plants had a sense of purpose, right? Became more interactive. They became more verbal. They came out of their rooms more. And those that were told that other people would just kind of sat there and languished. And, the interesting thing, and then we can maybe go to break and come back to talk about things more of purpose and what people can do for that. I see this in long-term care facilities all the time. And I've made very simple recommendations, like when there are plants around, how about if you have people go around and water the plants in the building, or, plant some plants and then watch them grow. And, this costs nothing. And yet I haven't been able to get people interested in doing something so simple that costs nothing, that could improve the quality of life for people and improve how they continue to live within that environment.
It's kind of crazy. I mean, when you go in for your annual checkup, your doctor should say to you, so, cough, how's your blood pressure? What are you eating? And tell me about your volunteering.
Right.
Tell me, do you feel the sense of purpose? Let me just mention a couple things very, very quickly, and then I know you want to go to break. So there was a famous study of a program that actually co-generates predecessor. Encore.org started. It's now an AARP program called Experience Corps. So this is older adults volunteering in classrooms. It was studied by a series of Johns Hopkins public health experts. And what they found is kind of amazingly, and maybe not surprisingly, that the kids who experienced this program had better reading scores, better sense of well-being, and all the rest, benefited from the interaction with older adults. But what they found, amazingly, was a whole series of physical changes, physical improvements in the older adults who were engaged in this volunteering: cardiovascular, osteoarthritic, cognitive, pulmonary, you name it. Rush Medical Center in Chicago did a series of studies on the impacts of a sense of purpose on the manifestation of Alzheimer's disease. And they found that people who had a sense of purpose in their lives had a delay in the impacts of Alzheimer's plaques and tangles on their cognitive ability of a couple of years. That has huge impacts both for individuals and families and for the broader society, looking at the cost of Alzheimer's. What's now AmeriCorps, what was then the Corporation on National and Community Service, that has programs like foster grandparents.
Right.
Did studies, people can find them on the AmeriCorps website, did studies that also found that people who were volunteering had these remarkable health improvements. So Phyllis, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's crazy. Obviously, certainly in assisted living, in skilled nursing, and independent living communities. But as a general matter, it's crazy that we don't say to people, among the things, sure, you should eat better. Of course, you shouldn't smoke. Yes, you should try to exercise if you can. Yes, you should try to stimulate your brain and do things that are challenging, learn a language, to try to learn some music, something else. But the other thing we should say to people is service, volunteering, helping others will not only help them, it'll help you too.
Absolutely. So, this is a good time to take a short break, and we'll be right back after this announcement. You are listening to Source TV Radio Network, WTSN Washington, D.C. Your live streaming all access pass to the arts and entertainment around the globe. Live streamed with global reach and stunning streaming to over 16,000 terrestrial and internet stations, reaching 160,000 DMV viewers and listeners weekly, over 3 million across North America, 38 million globally, in over 165 countries monthly, making Source TV Radio Network one of the highest independent media streaming stations on the East Coast. The network provides listeners with jazz crossover, R&B, and old school music from some of the most renowned artists. Jazz has all but disappeared from radio, but not on Source TV Radio Network. And don't forget to tune in to the Jazz Confusion Power Hour, Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, featuring some of the most talented rising new artists and legendary jazz, R&B, soul artists anywhere. Source TV Radio Network, WTSN, Washington, D.C. Okay, so we're back with Paul Irving for this wonderful, stimulating conversation. And Paul, you're such a wealth of knowledge and experience. I mean, it's so great to be able to talk with you. And, one of the things that I notice with people as I speak with them, they're, as a society, because we have this very ageist attitude, about people, as they continue on the aging journey, as I say, more and more I hear people say the most self-deprecating things, and they don't even realize the impact that this has on themselves, right? So even about a week or two ago, I was at my daughter's house, and their neighbor was there, and I guess she must be in her 50s, I think. Maybe late 50s, maybe. Anyway, and she was fooling around with my granddaughters, and they were doing kicks or whatever, they do gymnastics and whatever. And she picked up her leg to do a kind of a karate kick. And she said, "Not bad for an old woman." And I was like, what? And then, it's so pervasive that people don't even realize it. So I had a meeting the other day with some other people, and we were having an introduction, and it has to do with another business that I have. And the fellow was saying, well, he's very busy, but, he's 82. And I was like, wait a minute, what does 82 have to, well, he's still working. Yeah. Okay. But why should we think otherwise? So what are your feelings about that? How people internalize that message, and how it affects their well-being.
Yeah.
And when people hear them say that, how does that kind of reinforce that way of thinking?
Look, in many ways, I think that there's an external question, there's an internal question. Let me start with the internal question. So I think we have to have a sense of strength, and we have to have a sense of humor about it. People are not going to stop making jokes, and people are not going to stop having their assumptions, converting an entire population, changing hearts and minds. Phyllis, is something that takes certainly a generation, if not generations. I often say, if we really want to stop how people think about aging and think about older adults, what we better start with is kids' books, right? We have to start really young. We have kind of deeply embedded ideas about these things. So we have to be strong, and we have to recognize that there's a flip side to that argument, and when somebody says something about somebody who's 82, or when somebody says, gee, it's remarkable that they're doing this at age X, what we have to think about is the things that we value that are associated with aging, and I would say most particularly experience, which is why oftentimes when I write about this, particularly, you mentioned Harvard Business Review and things like that, I often talk about, rather than older adults or older employees, I talk about experienced employees, because we recognize that experience is an incredible asset, right? And experience can only be realized over years and years as we experience, the bumps and the challenges and the joys and successes that inevitably come with life. By the way, during the pandemic, I wrote a piece, which your viewers can probably find someplace, but I wrote a piece about the resilience of older adults in the midst of the pandemic. Paradoxically, so we know the population that was most at risk from COVID, and that remains most at risk from COVID. Older adults, people with chronic conditions, oftentimes multiple chronic conditions, were the ones most likely to be seriously ill or to die. And yet there were a series of poll-based studies that were done this was kind of 2020 to 2021, 2022. I remember one was University of Georgia. I think UCSD did one. And what they found was that older adults remarkably were responding to the pandemic in a more resilient way than younger people, that older people were less emotionally affected by it, that older people were dealing with it more effectively than young people. The younger people were experiencing higher rates of depression.
So why, may I interject and ask you, did they come to a conclusion
as to
why that is? I think I know, but I'm interested.
They did, and I bet your intuition is right, because it's kind of obvious. It's that we had experienced loss and pain in our lives.
Right.
We had already been bumped around. We had lost friends, and we had lost family, and we had to survive that, and we had disappointments that inevitably come with age. So those are beautiful characteristics, though, in business and entrepreneurship. By the way, the myth of business startups is that you have to be 20 years old and a dropout from Harvard, like Mark Zuckerberg, to be successful in business. The truth of the matter is that a high percentage of business startups are people who are in middle age, and they are more likely to be successful than businesses started by very young people. Why? Because, again, they have the perspective of experience. They have social networks.
Right.
They have their ego in check. They understand the challenges that they're going to have to put up with. So this is all a long way of saying that, yes, let's be honest, there are challenges with being old. I have more aches and pains than I used to have. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I can't run as fast as I used to run, and I probably get more tired than I used to get. I used to work around the clock, and I can't exactly work around the clock today. But boy, oh boy, and I think I'm no different than anybody else in this regard. I have all of the experience, all the things that I've had to deal with throughout life, on a personal level, on a business level, in terms of my social interactions, in terms of friendships and competitions and various other things. Have all those things informed the way I think now, the way I do business now, the way I think philanthropically now, the way I write now? Absolutely. And those are beautiful things that can only be accomplished through the accumulation of years. So we should celebrate our longer lives. And there's something else, by the way, that we should be thinking about, and that is, and this is both a sad fact and a wonderfully happy fact. And the sad fact is, we know, you and I, since I know you and I are close to the same age,
Right.
we know we have fewer years ahead than we have behind, right? And we also know as a result of that, how unbelievably valuable our time is and how beautiful life can be.
Right.
And those are things we often take for granted when we're younger.
Right.
So this combination of all the talents that we have associated with our age, and this recognition that what we do is really important because we don't have the time to waste, I think can make us incredibly effective in business environments and social environments.
So I just want to, somebody wrote something, and I mean, you and I can, we could go off on this tangent, but because of how they wrote it, I mean, you and I resonate with this. But so when I read it, you'll know. It says, "I'm perplexed. I just I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because we've talked about going in a political direction or not." So the person wrote, so you see, you're smiling. "I just lost my government job." I'm sorry, no, I'm not laughing because it's funny. "Courtesy of our king, who will hire a 67-year-old Latino woman. Now what do I do? This is a serious matter. It's just that I'm laughing because we talked about whether we would go in a political direction. I have grandchildren entering college, children, one of whom also just lost a contracting job as a result of budget destruction by Doge. Now what do I do as a productive contributor now?" This is a very serious matter. And it's interesting, and not to cut you off, but it's interesting to me because though you and I hadn't discussed this, I had thought about that. What about the people that are going to be losing their jobs at a certain age? And now what's going to happen? Somebody said, someone said, stop whining McDonald's is hiring. That's what his administration is doing to our seniors. Yeah.
I assume and hope that's facetious.
Yeah.
Look, there's a reality and a sad reality. So we're talking we're talking aspirationally, right? So what should our goal be? Our goal should be to defeat ageism and hiring. Our goal should be to assess people based on their individual capacity, not based on some notion that they're either competent or incompetent at a certain age. But the reality is today, age is still seen as a negative factor in hiring, sadly, and it shouldn't be, but it is. And that means a problem for a lot of people. And I feel sorry for the person who was talking about losing her job. It's wrong, and we'll avoid all the political commentary, but obviously something has to be done. So I can make a couple suggestions, but those suggestions may not ultimately really solve the problem. So one of the challenges of aging is our relationship networks tend to winnow, because if you think of when we meet people, we tend to meet people when we're young, we're kids in school. Oftentimes when we have kids and we meet our children's parents, we meet people in work environments, we meet people in social and faith communities. And as we get older, and of course we have family members and all the rest, and as we get older, people move away, those relationship networks tend to narrow, and opportunity is often, you probably remember, Phyllis, when you and I were kids, people used to say, how did I get my job? I got it through the New York Times.
Right.
Because it was, people would take out classified ads, not anymore. Right. So oftentimes opportunities arise from relationships, and we all have to be mindful about ways to expand our relationship networks. How do we do that? Well, we do that by joining organizations, getting involved in volunteering, going back to school. I'm an advocate of lifelong learning. None of these solve the problem tomorrow for this person who
right.
lost their job, But as a general matter, those are things we think about. The other thing is, and again, I'll mention volunteering again, if skill sets, for example, are stale, and we need to figure out a way to reskill, we need to figure out a way to learn new things. Oftentimes volunteering provides a platform for us to kind of reinvent, not just our skills, but reinvent how the world sees us, how the world perceives us. I went back to school. I said to Phyllis, it's funny because in my world, everybody saw me as the lawyer that I was for much of my life. But by the time I had gone through the process of doing an academic fellowship and then running a nonprofit and then starting the work I start now, I think that probably more people in my ecosystem think I'm a physician than think I'm a lawyer. They're wrong, and trust me, I don't I don't prescribe. But the point being that being involved in learning new things oftentimes opens doors that we don't anticipate.
Right. I'm anecdotally, and this is not to be facetious or funny, but the reality is, and we talked about the fact that a lot of people think that you're a physician. You mentioned that before, and you're associated with the Department of Gerontology. But that is really, I'm going to say, a prescription for life, to become involved, and for this person actually to maybe discover talents that you didn't even realize, and maybe, but like you say, doesn't help for tomorrow, but maybe in the long run, maybe there are passions or hidden talents or capabilities that you have that you can develop. And going back to what you said earlier, the reality is that there are more people starting businesses at older ages, and they are more successful than the number of people starting businesses at younger ages. Somebody just said, I had dozens of acquaintances and purpose. I had a government job for 40 plus years. I have a pension, so money is not the primary issue, but context is, it's gone. And
look, it's tragic, and trust me, it's not something that I'm supportive of. It's something that I find abhorrent. But I will say this: the answer is I had, and again, I'm not saying that I'm a model of anything, but I had one set of relationships that I had for many years. I actually worked with the same group of people, exactly the same group of people for 30 years, nonstop. They were my brothers and sisters in work. And I have a totally different relationship network today. I've retained those old relationships, but the people who I deal with every day and the things that I do every day, completely different. So I would say even having done something for 4 years, I don't know how old this person is. Phyllis, I'm just on the cusp of 73. I meet new people every day. So even if you've done a job for 4 years, there are new things to learn. There are new people to meet. There are new needs for the skills you have, and interestingly, you may not have a sense those skills are transferable. But particularly, the fact that you have a pension, and I'm speaking to this person who left a note, means that you have at least some ability to take risk, some ability to spend some time, maybe in a non-compensated arrangement. People need your experience. The world needs you. And so the question is, how do you take that experience that you've had, the expertise you've had, how do you get over the understandable frustration of losing a job in this crazy Doge world that we're living through? And how do you say, I can make a contribution in some kind of new way with new people? By the way, years ago, interestingly, Phyllis, Encore.org and MetLife did a phone-based study asking people whether they wanted to volunteer, and if so, what was the principal impediment? And the answer is overwhelmingly, people said that they wanted to make contributions to their community. They wanted to figure out a way to help others. They wanted to help people who were less advantaged, needed the assistance. And Phyllis, I'm going to make you guess. This is a test for you. What did they say was the single most important impediment? The reason why they weren't finding a way to make that contribution, to engage in that service. What do you think was the principal impediment?
And interesting question.
Take a wild guess.
You
want me to tell you?
either they didn't know where to begin.
Well,
They didn't know where to begin, or they didn't know if they would be appreciated.
that's you're incredibly close. So the simple reason was nobody asked.
Oh, well, there you
Nobody
go.
asked. But you're giving a variation on the same theme. So what I'm saying to this person who left this note, and I'm saying to others, whether somebody is asking you or not, your help is needed. I can tell you that I'm involved, Phyllis, I think you know, in 6 or 7 different philanthropic organizations right now. We all need help. We need help in every one of them. And there are organizations across the country and across the world that need help today. And so the answer is more in the loss of the job, express frustration, be involved in politics and fight back to the extent that you can fight back, but then try to figure out a way to do something new where you're going to meet new people and do something that's positive to help others.
So actually, a person that I interviewed when I had my podcast, Senior Straight Talk, it was actually the last interview I did, and I think that was about 1.5 years ago, was with Mark Victor Hansen, the co-author of Chicken Soup for the Soul books. And I had met him, just at an event. And he was talking about the book he wrote with his wife, and it was called Ask. And I thought it was, so this was now several years ago, right? So it's basically, I didn't say ask, right, when you asked me that question, but I thought it was so relevant that is right after I met him. We just took a picture and I said, oh, it's so great to meet you, and what, all this kind of thing. And I was trying to get in touch with him for the longest time and I couldn't. I asked this one, that one, the other one. And then I finally met the person who wrote his biography, Mitzi Perdue, a phenomenal woman. And so she introduced me to him. It took us some time. And, I just wrote him an email and said, I'd love to have a conversation with him about this book, Ask, because I think that so many older people could be doing so many different things if they would just ask for help, ask for, how to go about it, ask for what's needed. And so it's kind of a funny thing because I thought of interviewing him on the podcast, and I don't know if people could still go find it, but if about this very topic, it might be interesting if they could find it to listen to hear what he had to say. So what happened was I thought I was just going to have this conversation with him. And I said to myself, gee, Phyllis, this might be the only time you get a chance to talk to Mark Victor Hansen. So when, when you start this Zoom, you might just feel that you should be ready to go. And because he might say just, okay, let's go. And that's exactly what happened. So it was so totally off the cuff, but it was about that very premise. So if anybody wants to go, if they can find it, I think it's still on Apple Podcasts. I don't know if you could actually find the, I know it's listed there. I don't know if you could find the recording, but it might be interesting to hear what he has to say. But this same person said, I plan to retire, not having someone plan the time to retire for me. And I've lost my sense of, so this is bringing tears to my eyes, I have to tell you. I've lost my sense of control and dignity, work, organized time. And why this especially touches me so much is because I see that in the long-term care space, with all the people, the thousands and thousands and thousands of people that I've worked with, over my 50 plus year career. It just touches my heart.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the challenge is finding not grand motions, taking over an organization or changing the world. It's finding little ways to connect in new ways, registering in a community college class, volunteering with your local church or synagogue or charitable organization. Phyllis, I don't know if you've ever seen it, and I wish I had it so I could share it. There's a wonderful video. It was several years ago now, but it's of a group of older people in a retirement community. This is going to bring tears to my eyes because, by the way, you can't watch this video and not cry. but it's a group of quite old people. So these are people that I would assume are probably in their 80s, and somebody arranged a program for them to be able to coach kids in Brazil on English. So it's an online program. So what would happen is they would meet up, and these kids in Brazil would practice their English on these older adults. But what would happen is relationships would develop. So what the video shows is it shows these kids, kind of the beginning. They're doing English language. Then all of a sudden, in a later session, the older adults say, "Is something wrong?" I sense something's wrong,
Right.
and the kid says something like, "I had a fight with my mother," or I broke up with my girlfriend. And then at the end, they talk about how they love each other, and it's really remarkable if anybody can find it. But my point is, these are people living in a, I don't know whether it was independent living or assisted living, but probably not terribly mobile, not looking for new jobs, but having these remarkable little moments with a young person in a different country, giving them purpose and helping again another person. So I think, look, we all have to. I mentioned strength before. We have to be strong, and if we're feeling a loss of control and a loss of dignity, the way to begin to recapture that is by taking the little steps, like again, registering in a class, volunteering in something simple, meeting one new person and having a cup of coffee. And that begins to build. And that can lead to wonderful things.
So this right before we end, so that, that came up again, that what that person said, that they've lost a sense of control and dignity. And I hope we address that, but
let me also say, and this will probably get some of the viewers mad at me, but I'm kind of, some people think of me as the anti-retirement guy. Look up the word retirement in Webster's and tell me that that's anything that any of us would be interested in.
Right. So I'm so glad you said that, because I wrote about, I have a book coming out, as you know, maybe in a few weeks or a month. You wrote a testimonial for the book very graciously. And I did write about what that word retire means, put out to pasture, you have no use anymore, a jury retires to the back room, and
you're waiting to die. That's
exactly
basically waiting to die. Yeah, retirement. We're not talking about shifting careers. We're not talking about continuing a grindy work life. But what we're talking about is removing yourself from a society that needs you to continue to be involved, and where you need to continue to be involved because it's good for your health, sense of well-being, and very much your wellness in many ways. So yeah, I mean, rather than thinking of ourselves as retirement as an aspiration, unless for some reason we're trying to rush toward death. Let's think of life as an opportunity for new experience, new contribution, new social relationships, new friendships, new challenges, new learning. And we can do that at any age, regardless of our physical condition.
I agree. And so listen, this has been terrific. I think that's a great place to end. And I mean, there's so much more we could talk about. Maybe we could do this again down the line, but this has really been terrific, Paul. So thanks so much for joining me on the first show of Senior Nation. And I'm sure you offered valuable insights and information to the listeners and viewers. And I couldn't be more thrilled to be here with you. So thanks again.
Happy to do it. Best wishes to you and everybody listening.
Thanks so much. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and join me next week, Wednesday, March 26th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for Senior Nation, when I'll be interviewing William Smith, Chair of the United Nations NGO Committee on Aging. We'll be discussing the work of the United Nations Committee, the issue of global aging, and the United Nations Decade of Healthy Aging. now in its fourth year since its inception in 2021, aimed at improving the lives of older people, their families, and communities. Remember to tune in and stay tuned.